Brace yourselves, because this is probably the worst leftist I'm ever doing a response video to. Not only it is incredibly irritating as the person is arrogantly ignorant in his delivery, but also because his argumentation is beyond any pale of quality. He essentially argues that the left occupies all positions of power in academia and frankly everywhere else because conservatives equated with the right are too stupid and are at odds with time, who can never contribute anything of significance, which is a line of thinking very common amongst his socio-political demographic. The funniest thing is that all of his political videos are terrible, as it can be clearly seen that he is simply politically illiterate, thinking that Ben Shapiro, who he by the way thinks is far right, in his video explaining why exactly libertarians are really fascist, which I mean is a pretty standard kind of a thought for readers of The Salon or the Jacobin magazine and the watchers of Three Arrows, Vosh and ContraPoints, which presumably led him to make his video about him being an ex-alt-righter, and by alt-righter he really means somebody who watches Shaun Head, Thunderfoot, Lawrence Southern and Sargon of Akkad. So if you are waiting for a serious argumentation on his behalf, I must disappoint, but he does strike me off as a person that understands power relations, and although he does not admit it, it is likely that he adopted those beliefs that he holds now just as kraut for the sake of upholding the values of people considered to be of the highest moral class and prestigious, in order to signal his obedience and conformity, as well as to prove that he can be a member of that class. But for now, let me recommend you those two Telegram channels, History Memes Official for sharing historical memes and History Quizzes for testing your historical knowledge, and the links will be provided in the description. But let's go back to the video and let me play you his first point, and that is precisely why there are so few conservatives on campus.
So in both universities, I was near the fire, so to speak. I was doing the subjects that are considered to be most overrun by crazy leftists and cultural Marxists and what have you. So did I encounter any conservative viewpoints during my studies at any of the two universities? No. We had many political discussions with my fellow students, and honestly, I cannot recall people who were even right-leaning, much less conservative. And why is that?
So why haven't you met any conservatives or right-wingers? Well, there are two explanations, beside the usual leftist explanation of conservatives just coming from an environment of low IQ who are immediately swayed by the brilliant leftist academia and change their minds and put on hormone blockers next year, thanking God for their de-radicalization. I, however, come with a different explanation, which will answer the question of why there are so few conservatives' voices in those spaces. From this explanation, all other explanations ultimately grow out of, and it is precisely that we live in a socially constructed reality where leftists are associated with prestigious qualities such as being educated, smart, morally right and the right side of history. And most people want to think of themselves as such and become a group member that shares those qualities. Why? Well, they simply happen to capture all major institutions and powerhouses in recent times, and Adam something is just using circular reasoning after the fact to justify the current status quo, which is leftist control over society. But to prove my point beyond any shadow of a doubt, since he has told his personal experience, I will share mine, which is actually supported by the data. Right-wingers lie about their political beliefs on campus because of strong repressions towards their beliefs, repressions that are, by the way, are openly admitted by leftists, especially when they have a PhD. For instance, if you say that minorities underperform and it's likely due to genetics, 43% of PhD academics will support you being ousted, and that's just an open admission. The real number is likely over 60%. But across all domains of life, and especially so in universities, leftist position is more privileged, which define the position of all other people demanding conformity, and they either conform, as conformity is associated with above average intelligence, and people who go to universities, they are above average in intelligence, or you just stay quiet or pretend that you are a leftist like I did in my first year. And yes, I'm in social science. talking with other right-wingers who are doing the exact same thing as me, even in some cases writing papers in support of Antifa while actually being closeted white identitarians, which should never even happen. But there is another contributing factor to people turning leftists besides status, and that is due to the information that one learns in a university, and essentially that occurs due to a confirmation bias of the academics who teach it. This is why so many people graduate anthropology thinking race doesn't exist, despite being obviously wrong, and frankly, no other graph captures the social power of shaping one's minds than a result from other country, where anthropologists think the exact opposite thing, because Franz Boas was not as influential there, and they don't have a lot of racial minorities, and that's just a small example. What I mean by that is you never are exposed to right-wing thought on campus. It's all either leftist or liberals. The right-wingers such as Herbert Spencer, Oswald Spengler, Thomas Malthus, Francis Galton, and now increasingly Charles Darwin are either not mentioned at all or thought of as a bunch of pseudoscientist white racists who are clearly wrong. Instead, you get thrown into an echo chamber of constant normative prescriptions about how you can be an even better leftist, whether it's on lectures, whether it's textbooks or tutorials. It's everywhere, and your average student, thinking that there's clearly nothing else to it, adopts those beliefs, in addition to him associating himself with a side of social prestige, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is what this idiot has decided, but let's see what else he thinks.
Let's take Heidelberg University as an example. It has extremely high standards and it's very difficult for a student to get enrolled there. This is no for-profit community college, only the best and the brightest can get in. And those who do generally possess traits such as rationality, open-mindedness, curiosity, and a readiness to change one's mind in the face of new evidence. And right here we can start seeing the problem. Do any of these values describe conservatism? Absolutely not. They are in fact antithetical to modern conservatism. So right off the bat, universities have a selection bias against conservatives.
Of course, the author does not bring any studies to support any of those claims, and although there are certain differences in those domains, they are all less than a half of a standard deviation. Moreover, what the hell he means by rationality is unclear, while readiness to change one's mind as well as open-mindedness looks rather ridiculous considering the current climate of affairs, especially in the environmental/hereditarian debate about group differences as an example, where one side will not look at the evidence of the other, misrepresent them, oust them, and be dogmatic about their beliefs. But apparently universities really are bastions of free thought. Well, they might be if what you're really thinking about is how can we best redistribute wealth, what is the best way to bring forward multiculturalism, how could we expand minority influence, as well as how could we bring about total feminism by 2050. I'm sure there are many debates regarding those topics, however, those are debates amongst people who already agree with the leftist framework and normative statements, and are just arguing about the means in bringing about those goals. The debate that right-wingers want to have is, should we even want this? And now goes the dogma, and the open-minded, curious, and open to new evidence campus now transforms into a hell zone for those questioning the dominant narratives. Something Adam actually touches this in the video, just reaffirming my thought.
And so suppose that, as that stereotypical conservative, you try to enter this academic space where minority rights are being discussed. The topic of discussion being the socio-economic circumstances of Roma people in Central Eastern Europe from the point of view of government policymaking from 1920 until 1989. Now, you entering this space and offering brilliant and incisive commentary such as brown people bad will most likely get you kicked out, perhaps not on the most polite terms either.
However, despite this, he makes no wishes to change the situation in improving the diversity of political climate, which has proven itself successful and working, and instead makes suggestive attempts at justifying continued discrimination by thinking that all conservatives really have to say is that brown people bad. And it's very typical, especially for a person who has never interacted with a right-winger at a university by his own damn admission, literally thinking that all of its students are leftists, essentially operating with a prepared lefty framework with regards to right-wingers, misrepresenting what they are all about. But again, not surprising for a person thinking that Ben Shapiro and libertarians are either fascists or far-right. But even he did interact with right-wingers and even knew of their beliefs. Would he assume that they are sincere, or will he understand them? Of course not. Leftists are not capable of understanding what right-wingers are all about, and all studies that were conducted about this topic only prove that is the case, and for the most part that is because their moral foundations are not balanced, but right-wingers on the other hand can understand leftists. Furthermore, this effect is exacerbated in the academia, where all right-wing thought is presented as a straw man by the biased academics who present it just to discredit it, and this creates an echo chamber of people who are convinced that they know what right-wingers' ideas are, because these ideas were chewed to them by another leftist academic who himself does not understand them. Frankly, I'll bet actual money, because I'm pretty sure this is what happened with this clown. Next I'll play you a proof of what leftist indoctrination does to people, but brace yourselves, you're about to hear the most obnoxious and dishonest part of this video, so I just warn you in advance.
And the reason for that is because contemporary popular conservative views have been desperately outpaced by modern academia. We know that gay rights don't lead to the collapse of the traditional family. We know that trans rights don't lead to the end of the two genders and a mass sex change operation wave for gullible children. We know that immigration doesn't lead to the fall of Western civilization. We know that big government doesn't lead to communism and George Orlando's 1964. We know that women's rights to an abortion is a mostly beneficial thing. We know that welfare programs work, and that the bootstrap mentality doesn't.
And to add to his impudence, he should have also said that we know that all cultures are equal, we know that wealth comes from inheritance, we know that socioeconomic status predicts your intelligence better than genetics, we know that homosexuality is mostly genetic, but race differences in intelligence are 100% or mostly are environmental, and I'm sure if you ask most people in the humanities, they will agree with that assertion, because they know that their statements should be regarded as dogmas, and they never heard a counter-argument presented to them that wasn't a straw man. Moreover, things like does immigration cause the decline of Western civilization are not even debated in academia, which further shows how out of touch he really is with what is happening there. But what is debated is whether immigration contributes, for instance, to low levels of trust and cohesion, and boy oh boy, the results will be shocking if you have a degree in humanities, and similar with like all of his crazy arrogant assertions that come without any empirical support. Apparently because we know, and I think they know, and by they I mean midwits who are low in openness, high in conformity, high in narcissism, and are not well read. So people like Hunter Avalon, Zanderhol, and now this freak. Their ideas of right-wingers are basically lift yourself by your own bootstraps, lobsters, 1964, George Orwell, Vuvuzuela, my 100 deaths under communism, brown people bad, our glorious past good, social rights bad, conspiracy theories and religious fundamentalism good. Here is for example a small clip of him parodying Ben Shapiro.
Well, I reject your liberal fairy tales about there being multiple genders.
But it's a scientific consensus.
Yeah, well, scientific consensus, quote-unquote, doesn't mean much when oral colleges are overrun by these pink-haired, radical liberal, feminist, social justice warrior, wokeist types.
But that's just a conspiracy.
Well, let's say I reject your notion that it's some kind of conspiracy when it clearly isn't.
Well, then prove it.
Well, I have all these self-reported anecdotes from trustworthy news sites like Breitbart and killallfeminists.wordpress.com.
Yeah, that's not evidence. Neo-Nazis think that academia is run by Jews. I can find anecdotes for that too.
So you're saying you're an anti-Semite? No, I'm saying... You know what? I think I heard enough of your hateful garbage, actually. Proud Boy militia... security? Throw him out.
It is really off the charts that I'm not even sure if it's unironic, because hadn't I knew that he was a leftist, I would assume that this video actually makes fun of leftists and not Ben Shapiro because of how out of touch with reality this is. And now imagine how hard I have cringed while watching this bullshit. Finally, to finish this video, he makes an assertion that right-wingers have not contributed anything recently, and if you are in a leftist echo chamber or frankly an average person, you would probably agree. However, in reality, it's true that conservatives are not supposed to think of anything because they're simply conserving what we have, as leftists are conserving their power in the West. This is the first law of politics by Robert Conquest, for God's sake. Furthermore, conservatives are right-wingers only in the West and not anywhere else. If you go to China, Russia, or any other place, you will understand. So conservatism does not equate with right-wing ideology. Right-wingers, on the other hand, drive change and reform using the little resources that they have, and here are a few examples of what they have created so far. Human biodiversity, a revival and a breakthrough in group difference research, and here's a small sample of a few terminology and concepts used in this sort of a circle. Genomic-wide association studies, dysgenics, group selection, G-factor, and life history strategy, and much of it is now going mainstream at this very moment, causing the academia to shift in the right's favor. Another thing is the intellectual dark web, to whom I prefer the Dark Enlightenment or the NRX, which is a new groundbreaking critique of power that can be best described as a subversive right-wing cultural Marxism of the 21st century created by Nick Land and Mencius Moldbug. And those just happened in the past 15 years, while the left has not produced any new social theories since the 1980s, and honestly can be described as the conservative side here, as after the 1960s we are running on their hegemonic assumptions without change. Unless of course you're talking about transgender craze, green movements, witch hunts, as well as policy recommendations such as the Green New Deal. Well, if that is your criteria for contributing, I can bring up Brexit, alternative media and institutions, the use of cryptocurrencies and the rise of populism, but those are not social theories as you can guess, they are just done by people who are overwhelmingly right-wing. If I were to make a prediction, there will be even more right-wing social theories and movements in the future that will be highly influential as they are able to explain social phenomena and provide a better alternative to the status quo, and I hope that I will be able to contribute to it. But once again, thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel.